What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Vault. Lorcana's market has been on a steady climb lately. Fabled, Whispers in the Well, Winterspell, and Wilds Unknown all have cards quietly building value, while most of the community is looking the other way. But a rising market doesn't mean every card is a buy. Some are heating up fast, some are holding strong, and a few are sitting right on the edge of a breakout. Today, we're cutting through the noise to find the ones that are actually worth watching. Let's get into it. It makes the most sense to start with Fabled and work our way up to Wilds Unknown. The first card we'll take a look at is Dumbo, and as you can see, the ungraded versus PSA 10 recently started to kind of spread from each other. And as we look at some of the price listings here, the raw card itself has stayed pretty consistent over the last 4 or 5 months. Where it gets really interesting is into the PSA 10 graded cards. And as we look at this over, looking into February, it was still, under $1,000. From mid-April, it makes a jump into $1,000. And up until today, now some being sold at almost $2,000. So this eBay listing at 1950 PSA 10, it's accelerating at a pretty high rate right now. So some of these were listed at higher. Obviously, some people were trying to get the 1900, they were trying to get 1800, and took lower offers, but it still is showing that gradual increase on the card. The Dumbo card is an absolutely beautiful card. This is one of my favorite since the game has come out. But I think it's gaining some traction as people are starting to figure out that Lorcana is here to stay. So if we kind of dive into the next one on the Fabled list, Circle of Life, I think here people seem to enjoy having more than one character on a card at a time. So as we dive into this, you obviously have Simba, Nala, and their baby with Rafiki. You're getting multiple characters on this card. You kind of see on the ungraded, the raw card here. Again, there's not a major jump in the raw card itself, but when you jump into the PSA 10 side of things, you start to see where that growth comes in over the past few months. Now somebody listed this for $3,000 on eBay and took a best offer on it, but still, you're still getting hits on this card even at $3,000, coming down to $2,600. So this has seen quite a bit of an increase over the past 2 months. And again, I think part of that is just having multiple characters on one card at a time. The next one I want to take a look at is Ariel. She's got a couple of cards that are kind of making some waves right now, this being one of them. If we kind of dig into the data here, raw card, again, it's kind of a slow push up. And now we're getting into roughly $600-700 range on the raw card. PSA 10, looking at more of a jump late April to today. And some of these listings, it looks, I don't see a best offer being taken. So, I mean, $2,500 on this card is kind of crazy, especially since, this one obviously was listed at 10, taken as $1,500. But I guess it's also kind of interesting to take a look at some of these populations. This card has actually a pretty high population of 9s. Some of these cards that are really popping off right now have a bigger population of 10s. So seeing this one being at almost a third of them being in the 9 ranges makes having those 10s a little bit more important. But as we move into the iconic side of things, when you get into Fabled, obviously we're going to talk about the Minnie Mouse. This one has always been up there, obviously being one of the first iconics to be released. If we look at the raw listings here, again, there was not a major increase. It kind of seems to have flattened out over the past couple months in the raw card form. PSA 10, again, this is where we're starting to see those jumps. I've seen some of the recent listings being upwards of 8,000, but some of these sold, if we look at recent PSA 10 here, 7,250, a much higher population. So this is kind of what I was talking about. Like, if you look at these, the iconics, the minis, the PSA 10 population versus the 9s, it's a crazy disparity when looking at the aerial we just looked at. But this is always, you know, being one of the first iconic cards, you could tell that this was probably going to be a card that pops off a little bit. Again, diving into Mickey here as well. If we look, we can kind of see more, again, the raw side of things is going to be a gradual increase. We're looking at today anywhere between, you know, 3,000 to 4,500. Some of these TCG player ones get a little weird, but you know, raw card looking, you know, 6,000 listed, but took 5,300. So, but again, looking PSA 10, this has escalated so quickly from April to now. You know, you were looking at 5,000, 6,000, all the way to today having multiple $15,000 purchases. Let's take a look at this one here, almost $16,000 for the Mickey. I love that, you know, having a sequential Mickey and Minnie is even more rare. And in this, you know, you see a couple of them maybe pop up on eBay, and it's pretty interesting to see that somebody's taken the time to, you know, have those cards graded together for an even greater value. I think one of the sneakiest cards in this set right now is Winnie the Pooh, the Honey Wizard. And this one, I grew up with Winnie the Pooh, so this is one of my favorite cards. I think this is the artist of this card did this so brilliantly, having the staff with the beehive on the top. This is just such an epic card. And, you know, this one, as you kind of look at, you know, it's started to kind of pick up steam in the last couple months here, roughly, you know, $750, $800. Now the raw card going for almost $1,300. And as we get into the graded side of things, we're looking, you know, upwards of $3,000, $3,500 on some of the recent eBay sales. So again, one of my favorite cards. I think this card is absolutely beautiful. But it's kind of a sneaky one that maybe some people haven't been looking at, and it's starting to take off. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at with Fabled right now. So I think you know, let's move into Whispers in the Well, because I think there's also some kind of forgotten cards in that set as well. All right, when it comes to Whispers in the Well, I really only want to focus on two cards here. One being the iconic Ariel, and then the Hades iconic as well. So Ariel's had kind of an interesting past couple weeks, as the card finally, you know, the raw card itself gets over $1,000 at the end of May, and then jumps straight into this $1,400, $1,500 range as a raw card. And PSA 10, as the raw card's gone up, we've also seen the PSA 10 graded card for Ariel jump from, you know, upper $2,000, $3,000, and now we're getting into the $4,000 and $5,000 range. The PSA population for this card is also kind of interesting, being that there are even a couple 7s showing here. But it seems like this card has a higher rating of 9s and 8s than most of the other iconics that I've seen in just diving into this data. So I'm not sure if this card, because it was earlier, you know, had some quality control issues or what. But generally, when you're looking at the iconics of any set in Lorcana, the PSA 10s outweigh any of the other grades quite heavily, and this one's kind of the anomaly. So if we jump over to the Hades, pull up the PSA 10s as well. So the raw card here has had a pretty steady increase, nothing too crazy. But as we get into the Gem Mint 10s, you know, we're getting up there from $1,000 in April to about $1,500 in May. Now we're getting up into $2,300, you know, as we come into June here. So I think people are finally starting to figure out Lorcana and that there is something here from a collector side of things. And as the populations continue to grow on the graded cards, these values will continue to get bigger. All right, for Winterspell, the 3 cards that I want to focus on are the Enchanted Elsa and then the 2 Iconics. This card, interestingly enough, the raw card itself, if you look at this blue line here, has stayed pretty stagnant. But the graded version of the card, PSA 10s, in the last month or so has almost doubled in price. And one being sold yesterday for $3,500. As we kind of dig into the data on this one as well, it's pretty interesting to see the breakdown of the population, because again, this card's a little bit different than some of the higher end cards that we've seen. Again, the population is extremely low on this card, and it's extremely close to a 50-50 split between 9s and 10s. So maybe another card that had some quality control issues from the beginning, but it's interesting to see how many 9s are actually coming out of the population on this one. And let's jump into the Pocahontas. Let's take a look at the graph here. Again, this one, the raw card itself has stayed pretty much the same for the past few months. It's once we get into the grading side of things where these cards are really starting to take off. Again, this is one of the reasons why PSA is so backed up right now, that you can't even, they've taken away those lower tiers of the grading, is people are seeing the value in having these cards graded and authenticated. So this one, I think, might have been, nope, this one is actually a $3,500 sale. Sometimes even on this price charting website, some things look like they sold for that and there was a best offer taken, and it doesn't give you the correct numbers. But even in the past week, we're looking at one going for $1,800, and then even today being sold for almost double that. So it seems like more people are starting to figure out that Lorcana's here to stay, and that there is value in these cards. Moana, this card's really interesting just because it's taking a character that is not in their normal environment and making it work within the card art. It's really incredible to see. And even this, again, within the last 2 weeks, we're seeing this spike. And if you look as we get into May and June, it's just jumped up like crazy. So something to keep an eye on. If you can find something that's a decent price nowadays, or if the bid's low and the time's running out, it might be worth getting your hand in, because it seems like all these higher end cards, upper level enchanteds as well as iconics are exploding in the market today. All right, and finally, the craziest set of them all. So this set hasn't even been out for a month yet, and 2 things I'm going to call out here. You've Got a Friend in Me and Alien True Believer. I think it's something to keep your eye on. There really just isn't a PSA 10 population just yet, so it's only based on the raw cards. I'm sure we'll see some population growth in these. Again, You Got a Friend in Me having multiple characters on the card. I think it's the only card right now that has both Buzz and Woody on it. So with the upcoming release of Toy Story 5, I think that card is going to see a jump in the near future. But those 2 cards I think are something to keep an eye on. Merida, this card blows my mind due to the fact that the raw card itself is anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500, and just this week we're seeing the PSA 10 graded cards going for upwards of $11,000. This $15,000 is actually not $15,000. This was a best offer accepted. But if we're looking at these, $9,200 and $11,000, I think that's kind of where the market is with this card today. And the craziest one of them all is Buzz Lightyear. This card has jumped in raw form from the beginning of the end of May to where we are now. The raw card itself is going for over $5,000, and PSA 10s This is from yesterday. Let's see if this is an actual. Yeah, it looks like doesn't say best offer accepted. PSA population on this extremely solid. Looking at 90% being 10s on this card, but the value of it has gone up exponentially. Even in the last 2 weeks, almost doubling. So if you can find any of these cards for a reasonable price, whether it's raw or graded, it might be worth it. Again, with Toy Story 5 releasing next week, I think people are going to want to get their hands on these cards to go along with the movie coming out. So yeah, I think Wilds Unknown is just breaking the barrier on this, and so who knows what's going to happen when Attack of the Vine comes out next month. But it seems like even the older sets are starting that gradual increase in card value, and Wilds Unknown is just blowing up beyond belief. So we'll keep running these numbers back and seeing what's happening within the market every week. So stay tuned, hit that like, follow, subscribe. We'll see you next week.